Questions should stay on topic as it relates to municipal. Please don't bring up national or international news right now. Cell phones on silent, please. And please be respectful of each other. No cursing, no inappropriate language. Thank you. So, because I have the option to go first, I'm going to go first with, first we're going to introduce, there's 3 minutes, this is timed, intros for Councilman Joseph Krakoviak and Mayor Parisi. Mayor Parisi, would you like to start?
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's been my pleasure to serve as mayor of this community for the last 8 years. However, that represents a very small part of my life. My wife and I, Sheila, just celebrated our 25th wedding anniversary. We've been blessed with 2 children. Our daughter Kelly is in graduate school at Councilman University, and our son Robert goes locally here at Montclair State University. When my children were students just up the road at Redwood Elementary School, the principal at the time, Mrs. Kidlom, used to tell the kids all the time that life is about choices. And I've always liked that, and I've repeated it many times in my life, because life is about choices. Elections are about choices. We can choose as a community to invest in our infrastructure, to pave the 100 miles of roads that we have within our community, or not. We can choose to work with our Board of Education in improving safety in and around schools for parents to drop off their children, or not. We can invest in our recreational facilities and our recreational programs for the thousands of children that count on them every year, or not. We can do what we can to encourage hundreds of millions of dollars in private investment into areas of the town that need it, or not. We can work to promote pride, to promote the positive in our community and in the people that live in this community, or not. I've never been naive enough to think that everything we've done is right. I would never be foolish enough to believe that every decision I've made is right. But every decision we've made in government has been based on a very simple set of criteria. I believe in this community. I believe in the people that live here. And after all these years, I still believe that our best days are ahead of us. Thank you.
So thank you for everyone for being here, especially Roz, Jill, and Rabbi Tobin. But I do want to tell you, I believe that the mayor and I agree on a great deal of things, many number of things. In fact, I agree with most of what he just said, and but we do disagree on some important areas. So we'll be getting into that today. One of the things I agree on is that the mayor is a better public speaker than I am, so please just bear with me. West Orange is a great town. It's a great location. It's close to all. It's got good schools, lots of parks and recreation, an amazing history, diverse and interesting population by many measures. I like to say the world comes to West Orange. That's why my wife and I and our 3 children moved here in 2003, but it's become increasingly unaffordable. I've been on the council for 8 years. I've seen how often your government doesn't really work for you, and I know how to make it better. The mayor and the other council people have raised property taxes the maximum allowed by state law in each of the last 4 years. I'm the only one to vote against it. It's because I believe there's lots of ways and places to improve. I heard the mayor and others say that we can't reduce property taxes. Here to tell you that last year, more than 10% of the state's 565 municipalities reduced taxes, including 2 in Essex County. There's no reason we can't do it here. I've developed a common sense budget with volunteers from the Citizens Budget Advisory Committee. We've identified nearly $1 million in budget reductions while maintaining services. I hope to get into the details later. There's some printed copies, I believe, around here, and they're also on my website at joekrakoviak.com. But certainly, we won't get there with more maximum tax increases. Simply unsustainable, and they're hurting our property values. It's been particularly difficult for seniors, who make up more than 20% of our population. They are vital to the fabric of this community, but they aren't treated well by their government. There are problems with transportation, communication, and the mayor and the council opposed my proposed purely advisory senior citizens advisory board. The survey last year of seniors showed that the majority wanted to stay and age in place, but they were afraid they wouldn't be allowed to because of the taxes. We need to fix those challenges. Smart development. We haven't had a full-time planner in more than 5 years, and it shows. We need to hire one with economic development experience and address the challenges. We need to stop abusing the state redevelopment law at Essex Green and Executive Drive. The law says it's for areas that can't attract private capital, and these guys paid nearly $117 million just to buy the property. We also need to further green our town and expand open space and green space. We should provide further support for our library, expand recreation programs for non-athlete
Time is
children.
up.
Ooh.
I just called on myself to read the first question. As we all know, it took 4 long years to finally get a traffic light at Alyssa Drive. Increased zoo traffic continues to create unsafe conditions in the JCC area, in addition to incomplete sidewalks along Northfield Avenue and Pleasant Valley Way. We need Route 10 at Liberty Middle School to be declared a school zone. We need 25-mile-an-hour speed limits in our business zones, and we are in dire need of pedestrian safety upgrades at Exit 7 off of 280. Bear with me. The major roadways that traverse West Orange are under the jurisdiction of either Essex County, the state of New Jersey. What is your strategy in dealing with these elected officials, Joe DiVincenzo, Richard Cody, John McKeon, Maya Jacey? So what is your strategy in dealing with these elected officials to rapidly enact change on our roadways? And are you in favor of designating West Orange as a Vision Zero township?
Thank you. That's a lot to talk about in 2 minutes. So I think the brunt of the question is, what's the plan to work with other elected officials? And though at every level of government, clearly things don't always work perfectly, but I think West Orange, way longer than just 8 years, has been very fortunate to have good relations with the county and the state when necessary, and especially locally recently with our legislative officers in the Senate and the State Assembly. It was actually thanks to John McKeon that we're even progressing in turning that section of Route 10 into a school zone, and obviously with the county's help in bringing the light to Alyssa Drive. So as this area of the state continues to get more densely and densely populated, we're going to always have to continue to count on all levels of government to do what we can to make things safer. At some point, we all have to share an equal responsibility. We can't have police officers on every corner. We can't have stoplights on every corner as much as we'd like to. We all have to share a responsibility to be responsible to our neighbors and our neighborhoods when we're driving around, to be respectful of school zones, to be respectful of areas and our speed in which we're driving. So I think overall, the township has had a lot of success in dealing with different levels of government. There's always more to do. The question mentioned the area of the zoo at Northfield Avenue. That's a constant challenge. Our police department has been working and has continued to work closely with the sheriff's officers to address some of those issues. There is some ordinances that are going to be proposed soon to address some of the traffic in and around that area. So I think the issue with pedestrian safety, traffic safety, is something we can talk about at length all the time in every generation, because within each generation it continues to bring challenges. But I think we've been fortunate in West Orange to have very supportive county executive and county administration as well as legislative representatives from the state and even the state when necessary.
So I agree with Roz, and I also want to just highlight everybody that a major reason why we get improvements in our traffic around and pedestrian around town is because of her. She has dedicated her life to doing this, and we should all. So the short answer is I agree with everything she said, and I've been working with her and others to try to make a lot of these happen. But the other part of the short answer is professionalism, persistence, and patience, because I have found it extremely difficult to get both the state and the county on board with virtually anything we want to do here. I don't know what the reason is, but all I can do is continue to be persistent, professional, and patient. I've been trying to get the county and the state on board with expanding the portion of Mount Pleasant Avenue heading west into the intersection with Prospect Avenue for close to a year now. As many of you know, there's construction going on in the northeast corner of that property, and it would be a perfect time to expand into 2 lanes because the traffic backs up all around the S-curve down the mountain, and it's extremely difficult for anybody to get anywhere, and it's very close to the interstate. So what I have found is that you've got to be persistent, and there does not seem to be a great deal of interest by either the state or the county to help us here. And I'm hoping that a new fresh voice, fresh eyes here in town will help move those things along. Thank you.
Okay, so the next question comes from the audience, and Mr. Krakoviak, you get the first crack at this answer. Please share what you consider to be wasteful spending in our budget and what you can do to curb our budget.
Thank you. I'll be happy to. This is from the Common Sense budget again that I'm just, it's on my website and it should be floating around here. We pay someone to do the township Facebook page. We pay them $24,000 a year when we could use talented high schoolers from multiple high schools who could do it for free and would do it for free because it would be good experience for them and they could put it on their college application. I project that we could save $200,000 by changing the way that we employ our insurance broker, who, by the way, without competition, has had the contract for the town since before the turn of the century. These in school districts in the town, in the state. I think we could save $300,000 by introducing competition to the dozens and dozens of no-bid contracts we give out each year. Earlier this year, the mayor brought to the council a $97,000 engineering contract without any competitive bids. I was able to persuade them to take it off the agenda, make one more phone call, and the second engineering firm did it for less than $50,000. So I want to implement a policy that says if we're going to give more than $10,000 in a contract, it needs to be competitively bid. The town chief financial officer, the guy that is supposed to be watching after our taxes, has just gotten his 5th straight year of raises, totaling more than $33,000. He now makes almost $174,000. That's just the start. That's just the start. So all of these things, wasteful, and I think we could take those savings and move them into areas like traffic and public safety.
Well, since it's my budget to present to the council, I don't think anything's wasteful spending. So let's talk about a few issues that the councilman brings up specifically. First of all, with all due respect to our very talented high school students, I don't believe it's realistic to think that a high school student maintaining a high school schedule is going to address the township's website and Facebook issues. The consultant that the councilman references literally works for Facebook. So how much better can we have as representative in addressing the very serious communication needs we have as a community? So no, I don't believe that's a wasteful expense at all. He also references the insurance broker. What he doesn't mention, sure, it's a couple $100,000, but what he doesn't mention is what is paid for in those fees. The broker has to administer and operate a township website for all town employees for benefit-specific information for each of our employees. They provide and fund wellness coaches. We have a very aggressive wellness program for our employees to try to encourage healthy living. They also operate and administer the Medicare D program for our retirees. So to simply say that there's spending huge amounts of money wasting your tax dollars without telling you what's part of that is not fair and not the whole story. I tell people all the time, it's okay to disagree with me, but have the facts first before you disagree. He also mentions the CFO has had a couple raises. Yeah, absolutely. We're 55 less employees than the day we were when I got elected. That means we're asking people more and more to do a lot more, and a lot of those cuts have taken part in the finance department. So yes, we're expecting people to do a lot more, and they're being accommodated for it. And the last issue, quickly, as I'm running out of time, is the no-bid contract. It's entirely unfair and incorrect to say we're issuing no-bid contracts. The law is clear. If a contract is worth a certain dollar amount, you have to do a bid. Of course we're doing a bid. The councilman is right in saying we don't bid every contract, but the law doesn't say that every dollar amount needs to be
Time.
bid.
And let's go into the audience. Questions from the audience? Please state your name.
Hi, I'm Shalom. I'm a freshman at West Orange High School. We all know that global warming is real, and we all need to do our part to reduce our carbon footprint. Government is offering tax credits and other financial incentives for people to migrate over to EVs. I want to know how you feel about having West Orange install electric charging stations in the near future.
Thank you, and I should have acknowledged I didn't see Soham here recently, but it's really it's thanks to his efforts that Mount Pleasant Avenue is going to be before the state legislature soon and declaring it as the safety school zone. So thank you, Soham. There are always things we can do to improve the environment from a local level. Some things are a lot harder than others. West Orange years ago started buying hybrid cars for all our inspectors and non-emergency personnel. We also, although there's been a lot of controversy over the garbage contract, one of the reasons our garbage contract was not bid by more providers is our bid specifications require that the garbage trucks be natural gas in order to cut costs, but also to be better for the environment. A lot of garbage companies don't provide that. As far as your specific question and the charging station, I certainly think we would plan to, because it's our hope that as the car technology continues to improve towards electric cars, that the township will be acquiring electric cars. There are some charging stations now around town, not officially on township property, but I would certainly suspect that in the next couple of years we will start to purchase electric cars and starting to install them around town for residents who have them as well.
So I'm certainly open. I don't know.
No, I think you're good. It just
Okay.
it fell over.
I'm certainly open to any sort of environmentally friendly initiatives or purchases that we can make. We just need to do what I think we should do in all our purchases, which is to go through a cost-benefit analysis and figure out if it makes sense, and then check to see if we have money to fund it. The mayor mentioned the garbage and recycling contract. It's controversial because it just raised the cost of our garbage and recycling by 61%, more than $1 million. The council could have gone out for 5 years at the highest per year cost. They could have gone out for 3 years for a lower per year cost. They could have gone out for 1 year at the lowest annual cost, which is what I advocated, because it would shorten the pain. We need to go back to the drawing board and try to figure out if we can, make the specifications less stringent. He just mentioned we required natural gas. That may be one of the reasons why we only got one bid. But it also could be that we didn't get anybody, we didn't market the proposal well so that we could get more bids. That's what we need to do. That's what we should have done. We should have taken out for 1 year instead of the 5 years. We should have gone back to the drawing board, looked at the specs, and done what we should do to do best for West Orange residents and taxpayers. That contract, by the way, didn't change anything that we did from the current contract, but it also involved recusals by both the mayor and Council President McCartney, because both of them have relatives that work with this contract.
Okay, here's another question from the floor. How could we possibly justify Essex Green being classified as an area in need of redevelopment when its attendant tax breaks? You can take that first.
I mentioned this in my opening remarks. The state redevelopment law is very clear, crystal clear. The very first thing it says is that this is for areas of a municipality that cannot attract private capital. These guys paid almost $117 million just to buy the property. Implementing a redevelopment area, one of the key aspects of it is it can qualify for tax abatements, meaning no taxes for 30 years, and replaced by payments in lieu of taxes. What that does is it saves the wealthy property owners millions of dollars on a commercial project the size of Essex Green and Executive Drive. Folks, we just can't afford that. We're having trouble making our revenues as it is. Why would we want to give it away to somebody who can certainly afford any sort of improvements without any incentives? And in fact, the Essex Green developer went to the planning board several weeks ago and made an application to make improvements just like anybody else in town. It certainly looks like to me like the Essex Green property owners abandoned redevelopment. The mayor came out on the same day with a press release that said redevelopment worked. I don't get it. But we need to be really careful about giving away future tax revenues because they amount to millions of dollars. Edison redevelopment downtown, phase 2, they're already delinquent on their property taxes. This is prison. And they also failed to meet the milestones of phase 2, just like they did on phase 1, where they were delinquent on their property taxes for most of 5 years, and then wound up losing the project because they couldn't get construction financing. The exact same thing is going on there. We have a pilot in place that will give up nearly $8 million in future tax revenues in the first 7 years of the pilot.
So we can all disagree, but I got to tell you, there has to be at least a little bit of facts in the discussion. Essex Green, as part of a redevelopment zone, sure, the statute references can attract other investment. It also lists several other conditions. And what the position of the administration has been clear since the onset. We want it to be part of the planning process. A property owner has a right to build what they want to build. As part of a redevelopment zone, the township has a right to be part of the conversation. So yes, under the statute, tax abatements are allowed. They're not guaranteed. They're not a foregone conclusion. Essex Green has not asked for a tax abatement. They're not getting a tax abatement. And yes, redevelopment does work because in the 3 months since the approval of the zone, the township has spent countless hours with the owners in developing a plan that we think works, they think works, and they're submitting that to the planning board for ultimate approval to renovate a very important piece of property in the township. The redevelopment statute also references a public purpose. So in the executive drive section of redevelopment and in the Main Street redevelopment, there was public purpose. Besides in Main Street encouraging investment that was not able to be sustained by the property without the abatement, it also has a parking deck. It has retail space. And with all due respect to the councilman, to say Main Street redevelopment is a failure is almost laughable. $240 million of private investment, and to this day, as of today, not $1 of public money, not one, has been invested in Main Street. We have 50 people living there, paying top dollar for 1- and 2-bedroom apartments in an area of town that for generations was not able to attract that kind of investment. So I understand the councilman's been opposed to it, but to say that Main Street redevelopment has been a failure to the community is really very unfortunate.
15 years. What makes me sad sometimes is that I tend to go to South Orange, Maplewood, Milburn, other towns other than West Orange to shop and go to meals, and it kind of bugs me out. So I want to understand, how can we better fix our downtown and Valley area to make it more appealing for local West Orange folks to come and out of town folks to come, to drive revenues for our community and make it more appealing.
Thank you, Lisa. So the very basis of redevelopment going back to the early 2000s when the town first talked about it was that if you were going to attract business, you needed people of a higher economic demographic. And that's what the goal of Main Street redevelopment was from the onset. It was an area that had a very transient population of not higher economic demographic. So retail space, although very sustainable when I was growing up, when we were much more of a walking community, walking world, survived for years. As times change, you need people of higher economic demographic there to support local retail. That was the basis of redevelopment. So if we're going to have a more attractive business community in the Main Street area, then you need projects like Main Street redevelopment to be successful, Phase 2 to be successful. You mentioned the Valley. It's another perfect example. Another redevelopment project that the councilman voted against. It's introducing housing into Central Avenue to replace buildings that have been contaminated and vacant since the 70s. It's going to introduce residential communities there, some retail space, and more importantly, with the property that the township just closed on, additional parking to serve the Luna Stage, the Valley Arts, and the other business community that's there. So I don't think, and I'm not disparaging my community, I love West Orange. We're never going to have the downtown like Maplewood because our town is so spread out. Doesn't mean we can't have successful pockets of businesses around town, and I think we do have a lot of successful businesses in different sections of town. But to invigorate Main Street and the Valley, we need people who are going to live there and make an investment in the community to support that local business. That was the basis of Main Street redevelopment, and it's the basis of the Valley Street redevelopment as well.
The mayor, I believe, mistakenly put words in my mouth. I've never said downtown redevelopment is a failure. What I've said is it's a bad deal for us. And what I say right now is that it needs to be the most successful it can possibly be because we are all in. And we, as taxpayers, are going to be the ones that suffer if the project is not done well. I mentioned before, we need a full-time planner with economic development experience, and that's the first place downtown that they need to look to. We need to make the town easier to do business with. There are contractors and professionals like architects who won't work in this town because it's too darn difficult for them. But we really need focused efforts to turn our problem areas around. I mean, it's just clear. The Downtown West Orange Alliance has a budget of over $200,000, most of it from the town and from the property owners along Main Street and part of Valley. Folks, I've been here 10 years looking at our downtown, and I haven't seen much improvement. If we can't get something done in 10 years, maybe we need to try something different. And redevelopment is not necessarily the answer. Anybody who drives down there sees that all of that retail space that the mayor talks about, they've been empty for month after month after month. Let's not keep doing the same thing if it's not working. Let's try something different.
Go out to the audience. Any questions here? Anybody want to ask a question? Yes.
We got questions on this side. Okay.
We'll get to you next.
Thank you.
I'm Jerry Eben. I'm a 42, almost 43-year citizen of West Orange. My question is, if there is a wholesale lack of zoning and property maintenance township-wide, the examples here are but a few. A small residential over retail at Fremont and South Valley has been vacant for 15 years. 7-Eleven, AutoZone, lack of issuance of permits for errands, problems at Chase Bank down the street, hundreds and hundreds of open dumpsters, dumpster enclosures, though not our responsibility, but maybe we should talk. 280 ramps are filthy. How would you, if elected or reelected, solve just this one problem of no enforcement in this town.
Just for full transparency, Jerry is my appointee on the zoning board. Apologies. And we should also recognize that Jerry has been one of the longest serving public servants in our town. He's served on both the planning board, the zoning board, and the Downtown West Orange Alliance. He's a noted architect, and we really appreciate what you've done for our town. I totally agree with you. We must have talked about this 30 or 40 times. The lack of enforcement of our property maintenance and our zoning ordinances is just ridiculous. And I've heard the mayor and other people in administration say that they try not to enforce the property maintenance and the ordinances until somebody complains. If you want to complain about somebody, your neighbor, would you rather go over and make the directly complaint, or would you like to call the town and say it? The town should be proactive in trying to fix this because it hurts every one of our property values. When we have houses that are abandoned, that have tall grass, that property maintenance is not enforced, we need to fix it. And when I become mayor, we are going to be so much more proactive on this because it makes a huge difference in our property values. And I can't understand why we don't do a better job doing it.
Again, it's okay to disagree, but to say that we don't do property maintenance violations is insanity. We're issuing hundreds and thousands of letters and notices every year on property maintenance. There are 16,000 residential units in this town. And I can tell you, we could probably issue notices or summonses to probably a third of them tomorrow without incident. We could find violations. Now, I understand we need to maintain property maintenance. Of course we want to. And you referenced a few properties. That's your business that you did. I don't think it was appropriate. But there's special circumstances with some of those buildings, why they're vacant. And to say that there was no permits issued on errands is complete falsehood, but that's okay. The issue is, it's like everything we do in life. It's a balance. If we really drove up and down the streets of neighborhoods and issued notices and violations to the 16,000 households on a regular basis, like the councilman's suggesting, people would be standing up here screaming that why are you doing that? So it's trying to maintain a balance between enforcing property maintenance and not being heavy-handed and to burden overtax people already with countless violations. Do people need to cut their grass? Of course they do. And if they don't, we notice them. Do they need to paint their house? Of course they do. If they don't, we notice them. We notice them on broken sidewalks. We're sending out notices, dozens and dozens a week, if not daily. But I'm not going to apologize for trying to at least be friendly and business friendly with our residents who are paying taxes and trying to represent and recognize that you all have financial needs, you have concerns, and yes, sometimes maybe you're a couple months behind schedule in getting the house painted. But if you're telling us that as a mayor, councilman, that you're going to run around and bomb people on the head with violations, and I think that's something we want to know. That's not how I've chosen to govern, and not how we're going to govern. We are in this as a partnership. We all have obligations and personal responsibilities to each other, but it's not government's job to run around and bang you on the head every chance we get, every time there's a leaf or a blade of grass that's out of place. And I'll never do that as long as I'm mayor.
Okay. Before,
Go ahead.
Thank you. Tammy Williams. My question is regarding development of Essex Green. Development of any property does not negate its value. If Essex Green was worth $100 million, and it doesn't mean it's marketable. Distressed properties sit around town, sit around our state, sit around our country, everywhere. But they're bought, whether the price is diminished or excessive. So to me, that might be extraordinary. But for a developer of that type of commercial property, it may not be. But it still doesn't denote that that property is valuable and or marketable past its current dollar price. So I just question why we're saying Essex Green shouldn't have been deemed redevelopment. Thank you.
It shouldn't be a redevelopment area because it contradicts the very fabric, the basis, the foundation of the law. It just does. It just doesn't comply. There's actually a lawsuit going on, and that's one of the aspects of the lawsuit that says this doesn't comply with the law. That's why. Here's the other thing. If you want to buy Essex Green, that's great. If you want to buy Executive Drive, that's great. But we as a township and we as the taxpayers who suffer from the tax abatements should have a say in this. We should say whether we want this to happen or not. And if anybody thinks that Essex Green is blighted, let's show of hands. Who thinks Essex Green is blighted? Because that's what the law requires. Please raise your hand. Who thinks it's blighted? Okay. Who thinks it's untenable? Who thinks it's untenable? Great. You're in a small minority, but I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to talk to you. This is the point, folks. This is what the law says. This is what the redevelopment report said it was untenable. This is in October of 2017. Since that time, there have been 3 tenants who have come into the property. And the owner wants to expand. Great, let them expand. Just don't let them use our future tax dollars, which is what we give up with redevelopment tax abatements, for them to do it. It just makes perfect sense to me.
First of all, the state statute governing redevelopment does not use the word blighted. It's often referenced, but it's a misnomer. It does not use the word blighted. It lists several conditions in which a property can be deemed in need of redevelopment. And though there is a lawsuit challenging it, that's because residents disagree, and that's fine, they have the right to. It's the same group of residents who sued the town over Main Street redevelopment and ultimately lost. So lawsuits are going to be judged by the judges in the courts, not us. But it doesn't mean just because someone filed the suit, it doesn't meet the definition. The planning board and the majority of the council felt it met the definition. And again, as I mentioned earlier, not to give an abatement, they didn't ask for an abatement. There's going to be no abatement on the council agenda because there's no abatement in regards to Essex Green. But to say that the project and the property wasn't in need of something, I think we're all kidding ourselves. The Essex Green property has been refurbished in one form or another 3 or 4 times over the years. But to say now that it doesn't need something, of course it does. It needs an investment, it needed a plan, it needed people with money. And luckily, why Clarion bought it, that's their call. They did spend a lot of money. They're well-funded, well-thought-of nationwide company. We're thrilled that they're here. But to be part of the process and part of the planning was why a redevelopment zone was created, and we met more than the ample definition of the law in the multiple conditions that are outlined in the law that does not use the word blighting to meet the definition. I think the plan that they came up with is an exciting plan. Hopefully the planning board will agree, and hopefully they'll start construction in 2019. But I think in this case, the law worked to the township's benefit, and ultimately something on Essex Green will be redeveloped, which will be an important part of this town for the next generation.
Okay, here's another question from the floor. We've been doing a lot of question and answers here about our redevelopment and everything. This is something that's very important and very close to my heart. What do we do and how do we plan to involve more residents in the decision-making process of this township, including senior programming and allowing our seniors to age in place here in West Orange? Mayor?
So without question, when asked, I tell people one of the most important jobs of being mayor in a town like West Orange is to engage the community, to encourage members of the community to get involved in commissions, committees, nonprofits, community groups, whatever someone's interest. We do all we can to encourage people to get engaged, and we hopefully have created a welcoming atmosphere for people to do that. We have multiple commissions that are sanctioned by the town. There are countless number of community groups not affiliated with the town. So I think We do a lot to encourage community involvement. As an administration, we welcome community input, whether it's through office hours, community meetings, or any number of other ways. It's not to say we're always going to agree. Not everyone's always going to agree. It'd be crazy to think that we all would agree. As far as the senior community, it's been an issue and one that I've been vehemently disagreed with. But I do not believe that a senior citizens advisory committee is necessarily important to the process or encouraging people to be engaged in that community. Patty Duffy, our senior citizen coordinator, has a number of volunteers who've worked with her for years on various community senior programs. Bill Keogh, who's here, has a countless number of volunteers who work with our senior citizen golf outings. So, in my opinion, it is the council that serves as a citizens advisory committee. We can't have committees that serve every one of our paid departments. That's the council's job. The council's job is to take input from the community and represent the members of the community that they've been elected to represent. So, no, I do not believe a citizens advisory committee for all our paid departments is important. To still encourage people to be involved and to support the programs that they think are important. And I know the councilman's going to disagree with me, but I believe that's the council role more than
Well, that answer pretty much answers my questions about why the mayor opposes a senior citizens advisory board. It's a purely advisory board. When the council refused to second my motion to introduce the creation of this board, one of the council members said, the mayor doesn't support it, so I'm not going to vote for it. And they wouldn't even second it to give full debate and discussion of this. They talked about all the things that were wrong with it, but never suggested a single time what should be done to be improved. Let me tell you some of the other things that the mayor has done that discourages participation by our residents. He and the other 4 council people refused to comply with the 2009 resolution creating the Citizens Budget Advisory Committee that requires him and the other council people to appoint people to this board. I don't think the mayor has appointed anybody to that board, I think, since he took office. He was also the person who opposed putting the $6.3 million in taxpayer guaranteed bonding for Edison Phase 1 to a referendum after the proponents of this delivered almost 3,000 petitions asking for it and fought it in court and won. I sincerely want to increase engagement by people in town. That's why I immediately put appointments in. That's why I wanted to create the Senior Citizen Advisory Board. Folks, these people represent more than 20% of our population here in town. They should have a voice. They should have a voice. We've got a pedestrian safety advisory board. How many people? Who do you think is more? People that walk to and from around town, or senior citizens? But he's fine with the pedestrian safety advisory board. I just don't get it. I just don't get it.
Okay, here's another one from the floor, and then we're going to go back to the floor. Oh, you have a question from the floor? Okay. Yep. Okay. You got the mic?
No. Jeremiah Salinas. With all the new residences going up in town and attracting more and more people to move into West Orange, because it's such a welcoming, diverse population, how are we making sure that this is not going to cause stress to the school districts, to the school buildings, and making sure that for the future we don't have to, I guess, have a plan for physical space to making sure that all the kids are necessary educational needs are being met?
Very good point, Mr. Salinas, about not only the overcrowding of the schools or potential overcrowding, but also residential development has been shown by research after research study to be more expensive to a town to serve in terms of services than commercial real estate. I am always in favor of trying to get commercial real estate here as opposed to residential. I think one of the things we could do is get people who are more independent on the planning board, the zoning board, and we also need this town planner who has economic development experience, and say, look, we don't want to overcrowd our schools. We don't want to add cost to our from residences. Let's try to focus on getting some commercial here. Let's look at where we can put in retail, where we can put in medical. Let's actually try to do that instead of just letting the developers come in, and they want to do residential because that's the fastest way for them to build it and sell it. That's what they want. But what do we want? And I think if we can get the right town planner in, we can get more independent people on the planning board and the zoning board, I think we can move the town around. And that, as you are, I'm sure, well aware, the last study that the school district did, looking at future population trends, showed that there does not seem to be a concern here. What they didn't address in the study is why we continue to have so many of the students in the temporary trailers. The temporary trailers have been here, for the most part, I think, for more than 10 years, and we need to fix that.
So there's a lot of points to that question, and a few disagreements I have with the councilman. So first of all, it's nice to sit here and say, or even blog about we should get commercial development, It's driven by the economics that are out of our control. Whether we like it or not, the office market is dying in North Jersey. Becker Farm Road is dying. Executive Drive is very, very vacant. No one's building office space as much as we love it. No one's building shopping malls anymore. So to just say that we want to magically all of a sudden encourage commercial development and some high-priced planner is going to bring that is wishful thinking at best. Of course, any project has to be considerate of the fact that it could produce kids. Generally, this is not unilateral across the board, but the Main Street project and the Valley project is mostly one bedrooms. Now, could one bedroom produce students? I guess they could. It's not out of the question. But statistically, it's very unlikely that they will. Even the project in the Valley that is just broke ground, mostly one bedrooms. There are some twos and some threes, so will it produce students? It's possible. But to the point referenced about the demographic study, right now, the schools do not have an overcrowding issue, and birth rates, at least projected over the next several years, don't seem to be an issue that would be something we'd have to deal with as a district. Now, for those of us who've been here a while, we had overcrowding in the 60s, under-enrollment in the 80s, overcrowding in the late 90s, so we know it's going to ebb and flow. But to the basic point of that, and this again is a balance, I understand we don't always want a ton of students bringing in, but it should always be our goal that we are building a community that is attractive to young families. And if we ever get to a point where we're going to out loud say we don't want young families to move here, then that is a community.
I have a question from the floor, and then I will get to your question. Okay, this question is like a piggyback. Are you supportive of term limits? And if so, and if we did have term limits, after decades of service, do you now think it's time for a new township attorney, especially if they have relatives on the planning board? Joe?
You can't make that stuff up.
Folks, I've been on the town council for 8 years, and I've watched meeting after meeting when the other 4 council people, doesn't matter who's there, vote between 99 and 100% of the time with the mayor. People that doubt me, I just send them to the town council meeting videos, because that's exactly what happens. And that has totally convinced me of the need for term limits. Totally. So I've already announced I'm term limiting myself on the council. Just because we don't have a law that says term limits doesn't mean we can't do the right thing. So I'll just put a little plug in. I'm not running again after this election unless you make me mayor. If you guys want to get rid of me, you know how to do it. If you guys want to keep me, you can do it as well. Honest to goodness. The founders of our country envisioned people who would step out of their private lives, give some public service, and go back to their public lives. We don't have that anymore. We've got people, the mayor's running for his 6th four-year term as an elected official. Councilwoman McCarthy is running for the 5th four-year term on the council. Folks, we need new ideas. We need new blood. We need new perspectives. And I think term limits are a perfect thing to do.
So before I address the issue of term limits, let's just be clear about something. The councilman likes to say that he's routinely voted against 4-1, 4-1, 4-1. Let's talk about what those 4 votes are. They're approving contracts to pave your streets. They're approving contracts to build fire engines, to hire firemen and hire police officers. They're approving ordinances that put up stop signs and stoplights. They're approving construction of parks. They're approving a building of a new park that the councilman voted against. So if he wants to disparage his colleagues, that's his right. But you should know that what they're voting on is moving this town forward. It's investing in this community. It's the bus lane at Gregory, 4-1. It's the kiss and go lane at the Kelly School, 4-1. It's new athletic fields for the kids to use. So he really shouldn't just assume and imply that they're doing anything underhanded other than governing and serving the people of this community. Now, I'm going to make a statement that's completely self-serving. I believe at the federal and state level there should be term limits. We shouldn't have people serving 40 years in the United States Congress or even the state Senate and the state Assembly. Locally, I think there's a difference because we are more directly in contact with people. In this town specifically, we're not running as a party. We don't run on a line. We run as ourselves. So if the voters want to vote me out, that's fine. But one last point. To say anything disparagingly against Susan McCartney, who has served this community in countless positive ways, I think is really shameful.
I really don't think I need the microphone. On a personal basis, who is your political hero and why?
Okay, you go first.
I don't know that it's fair that I would say that, so I'll say it on a more personal basis. When I was first elected to the council in 1998, I was filling the unexpired term of then Councilman John McKean, who became mayor, and I was fortunate enough to follow him as mayor. So, though historically there's a lot of figures that I've always admired, I would talk about it on a personal basis. John has been a great public servant and a great friend to me and my family, so I would say John McKean.
I would just like to make a public service announcement. Remember at the beginning of the discussion I said that the mayor is a better public speaker? He clearly is. But I really wish he would stop the straw man arguments every time he tries to answer any of my comments and would he just directly address what I said. My hero, hands down, is Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln was this nobody who was born in a log cabin and pulled himself up by the bootstraps, became a lawyer, became a local politician, a congressman, and then ran for president and won in what was one of the most difficult times in the entire history of our country. And he knew what he wanted to do. He wanted to he knew what he wanted to do. He wanted to keep America as one, and he wanted to end slavery. And he did both. And he did it with style and the most incredible oratory I think our country has ever seen. So he's by far, I don't even come close to him, but he's my hero.
Let's open it up. Any members of the public? My name is Wendy Schumann. How will you limit development of the parcel of land above the West Essex Highlands that will destroy 20,000 trees in an untouched forest and affect the environment negatively while adding 700 residential units to one small road, which will increase traffic dangers?
Folks, that is probably one of the most difficult situations that our town faces, because what's going to happen at that property has been largely taken out of the hands of the local municipal government and our residents by the unelected members of our state Supreme Court. And they've been doing it for decades. And they say that the property owners can have a great deal of development authority if they help the town meet their affordable housing obligation. I'm on an ad hoc committee with Council President McCartney and several other people trying to mediate, negotiate in private. I can't really talk about it, but we are definitely trying our best to try to minimize the damage. If you want to fix this, you've got to go to your elected officials at the state level and the governor and get them to pass laws and get them to put people on the Supreme Court that understand the difficulty that their rulings are putting on local municipalities. We are incurring millions of dollars in costs to meet these affordable housing obligations. And now with the recent changes in the law allows these developers, these property owners, to develop this property. And there's not a whole lot we can do to stop them. We can only try to minimize the damage. And I'm sorry to say, it is largely out of our hands.
The township has fought hard to try to prevent development on that property going back to 1998 when litigation first started. It's taken many forms since then, and there have been a few applications to the planning board since then. But the town will continue to do whatever we can to prevent development on that property. Acquisition, unfortunately, is not realistic, but ultimately some of the new fair housing laws are going to make it very difficult to fight a densely populated project on that property. So I don't know at this point if the decision is ultimately going to be made by the planning board, the council, or even the residents of the Highlands. I think it's going to be made by a judge, and that's going to maybe put us in a difficult position to stop the development. The property does have developable parts of it. A lot of it's wetlands, but of the 120 acres, there is land that could be built on, and current zoning would allow 60, 65 single-family homes. Clearly, that's not what they want. They want a densely populated project, and it could be a project that's going to be hard to prevent if the court continues to interpret these new fair housing laws as they have been. But we'll do everything we can, as we've done for 20 years, to try to prevent it.
Okay, this is a little lighter question. One of the questions from the audience is, what do you find most rewarding about being a mayor or councilman? What do you find most rewarding? Happy. Joe?
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought it was mayor. I have to think about this. There are lots and lots of challenges. I wish more people would put themselves forward for public office. I know it's difficult, but it can be done. I really enjoy the idea of serving or trying to serve my community. It's it's one of the most surprisingly fulfilling things I've ever done in my life. It's great to think that I'm actually trying to make a difference and am making a difference at this level. I don't always make a difference. Good Mayor referenced 4-to-1 Joe. Occasionally I'm 3-to-1 Joe. Most of the time I vote with the legislation and I vote with the rest of the council on the majority of times. But the reason that I'm known as 4-1 Joe is because the other council people never say no. Never say no. So the only time when somebody says no is me. And I feel like I have to do that because I'm trying to serve my community. The other thing I really enjoy is just meeting people. Meeting people. This is such an interesting town to live in. I've met a chess grandmaster from Russia. I've met royalty from Africa. And it makes it such an interesting place to live on a day-to-day basis. And I would say that those are the two most important things to me: the community service aspect and meeting really cool, interesting people that I never would have met if I'd stayed where I lived before.
I'll keep a light question light myself. I do enjoy meeting people. I think a long time in community service, the best part of that has been to meet a lot of wonderful people. I think on the light side, and I didn't realize it as a councilman, but as a mayor, you get to do a lot of cool stuff with the kids in our schools. So I've enjoyed working with different school groups and different kids within the community. And I think lastly, what's really fun as mayor is you get to perform weddings. So I've gotten to perform a lot of marriages to people I know and a lot of people from around the community. So that's been a pleasure.
Got two in this section. And Peter.
Hi, am I speaking into this? My name's Arthur Dubrov. I'm as loud as he was. I guess I don't understand the governance process within the township, so I'm speaking a bit out of ignorance. But being here and hearing this 4-1 Joe stuff and hearing the back and forth of the things that he objected to, Councilman Krakoviak objected to, if we had a change in the mayoral position, what is the mayor doing unilaterally that he doesn't need the support of the council from? And if, what does that mean in terms of the governance process going forward if there are, as has pretty much been described, 4 councilman flunkies who are, Parisi flunkies, when Councilman Krakoviak becomes mayor, if that would happen, what would get passed and what wouldn't get passed? What's the governance process in terms of how much the mayor can get done without the council support?
First of all, I think calling 4 elected members of the community Parisi flunkies is a little insulting, quite honestly. West Orange has what's called a strong mayor form of government. There are multiple forms of government that are allowed under the law in New Jersey. West Orange has had a strong mayor form of government since the 60s. That means that the mayor runs the community. I don't need council approval to plow streets, send police officers, administer the town, have trees taken down. I need council approval. Forgive me. The mayor needs council approval on budgetary items and the passing of ordinances. The passing of expenditures, meaning to bond money, requires a supermajority of council, requires 4 votes, where simple ordinances or resolutions require 3 votes. But the day-to-day operations of this community, running the police, the fire department, the recreation, public works, nursing, health, all those other things that we do as a community are under the direction of the mayor. It's the council who passes legislation and approves funding.
I agree with the mayor. I don't think we should call our public servants flunkies, and I don't think that's what you meant, but I'm sure that's not what you meant.
Saying what I heard.
Yes, okay. But you didn't hear it from me. I'm just giving you the facts. As the mayor said, we have a strong mayor government. Here's what the mayor does that I wouldn't do. The mayor proposes the annual budget. If I am the mayor and I don't think something makes sense, I don't even propose it to the council. They can't approve what I don't propose. If I have a contract that I don't think is in the best interest of the town, I don't propose it to the council. I work on it until I get it. So there probably wouldn't be a 4-1 Joe if I was mayor. The other thing that the mayor does is he makes a huge number of appointments to the boards, to the planning board, to the zoning board, to virtually every board we have in town. And there was some reference to the town attorney, Richard Trank, and his son, Andrew, who I think still lives in the house with him, has been appointed to the planning board. I wouldn't do that. He's college age and doesn't have a whole lot of real estate or law, legal experience, and I just don't think that would be something I could do. So there's a huge amount of change. Here's the other thing. I'm 4-1 Joe because, as the mayor pointed out, the rest of the council doesn't need my vote to do anything. They pass all the resolutions and all the ordinances with 3 votes, and they pass all the bond ordinances with 4 votes. That's why it's really important, if you want to see a change in the way the town's going, to get at least 2 independent council people on the board. They don't have to deal with me as 4-1 Joe, but they will have to deal with me as the mayor. Then I have some power that I can exchange with them.
Thank you for the 2 of you to get together so we get a chance to watch you in action. I do want to address the term limits again. I don't trust our country's politics on a federal level, on a state level, even down to a community level, and I think it's important for us to have turnover, because that's, for me, that's, a lot of people can't delve deep into the politics of things, but I can see things on the surface area, and I know that, the longer that people stay in office, the more likely there is going to be some cronyism. I'm not implying that there is.
What is your question, sir?
The question is that it's all about no bid contracts, which I hear that appears that it's not very much of in this county, and that we have the same insurance representative since the 90s. We have this.
What is your question, sir?
The garbage recycling. Why is there not been more bidding contracts going on? Now, those are the 2 I only know about. Is that there was no bid with the garbage and recycling, the insurance company. There's a lot of contracts that I've been reading
Thank you.
about.
Let's have Joe and thank you.
So, first of all, professional services are not bid. Generally, professional services are not subjected to the same bidding laws, public bidding laws, as building a field house or buying a truck or paving roads. So you're right. The insurance broker's been the broker since the 90s. Town attorney's been town attorney for a long time. That's the mayor's prerogative with council's approval. I believe we have a lot of professionals who are doing a good job for the community. I don't believe in change sake. That's my prerogative to believe that. You can disagree with that. The fact that the garbage contract, to say it was no bid, is not true. They were the only responders. And to say that we should do something to entice more bidding is illegal. The whole idea of public bidding is that it's supposed to be a hands-off approach. You submit the specifications and people bid. You hope a lot of people bid, but in this case they didn't. But there's a lot of reasons for that. Councilman intimated that it's because my brother works for the company, which is wrong. My brother has a job there for a long time. That's where he works. It happens to be in that business. That shouldn't preclude them from responding to the bid. Our garbage specifications, when compared to neighboring towns, offers a lot of services. We also require the natural gas trucks. We have tough topography in town. We also have 16,000 household units that they have to pick up 3 days a week, twice a week. It's a difficult contract. When you talk about the recycling, all our professionals told us before we even went to bid, we should go back to separating recyclables because the recyclable market had completely bottomed down internationally, not only nationally, and they told us there's a good chance the contract is going to go up. So although it's been talked about, you shouldn't assume by that conversation that something was done illicitly. We submitted the specifications for the same garbage. If we reduce the contract, if we said we're not picking up bulk anymore, like neighboring towns do, once every 6 months, if we said we're not picking up recycling, we're going to take it to recycling centers, some neighboring towns do, yeah, we probably would have got more bidders. But that meant lowering the services provided to the community, and it was the administration's decision not to lower the services.
So yes, the state law says that you do not have to subject professional services contracts to competitive bidding. Lawyers, accountants, insurance brokers, engineers, the list goes on and on. And the law doesn't say you can't get competitive bidding, doesn't say you shouldn't do competitive bidding, just says you don't have to. We have driven a Mack truck through that loophole here in West Orange. We give out dozens of contracts a year with absolutely no competitive bidding. The mayor brought to the council earlier this year a $97,300 engineering contract. I questioned it. I said, did you get competitive bids? The business administrator said, actually the chief financial officer said no. I said, how in good conscience can you give out a $100,000 no bid contract without competitive bids? So they took it off the agenda. They went and made one more phone call, and the second engineering firm did the exact same works for less than $50,000. With one phone call, we saved more than $50,000. I want to implement a policy that requires us to bid out, competitively bid, any contract that we expect to spend over $10,000 on. And that's why the savings that I project, $300,000, are so big, because we give out so many of the contracts. We just don't do competition for our lawyers, for any of these guys, and we really need to. It will save us a ton of money.
Raise your hand up, Senator.
I don't have any problem with my ability to project either. I was a big fan of the television show The Sopranos until it went off the air several years ago. But in my opinion, the truth sometimes is even stranger than fiction. I apologize if this is a redundant question, but I find it to be very curious as to how the brother of both our mayor and our councilwoman, Susan McCartney, both coincidentally work for Roselle Carding, which is our carding company and has been our carding company for a number of years, and right now is being discussed and rediscussed for the fact that they have won a no-bid contract in consecutive terms. I can't remember. No, I think I answered the last question, so I should answer this first.
I know my time is wasting. I'm just trying to figure out what to say that I haven't said already. It wasn't just. It wasn't just. This is one of the examples of 4-1 Joe, and only it was 3-1 Joe because Councilwoman McCartney recused herself and didn't vote. This is a perfect example of. Excuse me. We could have gone out for 1 year, just kept the term short, gone back out next year, and there is no law. There's no state law, no procurement law that says you can't make sure that every contractor in the state knows about this. Now, I know they have services to be told, but we need to make sure that everybody knows about this, everybody knows about the specs, so that they can make the decision about whether to spend the time and money to make the bid. The highest per year cost was 5 years. The next highest was 3 years. The lowest cost was 1 year. What in the world are we doing? Taking 61% increase, that's an equivalent, folks, that's the equivalent of a 2% tax increase. What the heck are we doing taking that? So it's not just, the questions that you raised. It's also, why did the council even do that? And this is a perfect example of why I'm 4-1 Joe and 3-1 Joe. It made absolutely no sense to me. We should have gone out for 1 year.
A couple things I'll try to address quickly. First of all, the councilman disagreed, and that's his right. We chose the 5 years because the professionals said if you choose the 1 year, when you go back to bid in a year, based on the conditions, especially in the recycling world, we could see a worse contract. The professionals believe that taking the 5 year was, in the long run, the best economic option for the community. As far as my brother working there, first of all, to be clear, and I'm not a lawyer, we technically didn't even have to recuse yourself because a brother, a sibling under the law, doesn't reflect a conflict. We did because we believed it was. These contractors first got the award in 2006. My brother's been an employee there since the 90s. It's where he works. They shouldn't preclude them from submitting a public bid. Again, you said it was a no bid. It was a public bid. They were just the only responders. So in 2006, Councilwoman McCartney and I, because our brothers have worked there since the 90s, felt it maybe just looked better that we stay out of the process. So every time they bid since then, we've recused ourselves so there's no appearance of impropriety. You've made an appearance of impropriety simply because my brother works there, and I think that you're right, but I don't think it's correct. My brother happens to work there. He has a right to have a job. As far as what the councilman indicated, it's really naive, in my opinion, to think that every garbage contractor in the state didn't know that the bids were out. In fact, multiple bidders came to the pre-bid meeting. In the end, only one submitted the bid because only one felt that they wanted the contract and felt they could do it, in this case, continue to do it, and they submitted the bid. If we went rebid, it's often been suggested we should have rebid. They were the only bidders. If we rebid, there was a very real likelihood that their rebid would have been even more expensive. So the councilman can make a lot of intimations about being inappropriate. Based on the professional experience and our own experience, we felt 5 years was the best choice for the council.
Okay, questions? Okay. All right, another question from the audience. Go ahead.
The microphone's coming.
You need a mic?
My name is Asmer Michael. I'm a proud West Orange resident, and I love my mayor. So what I'd like to ask is that West Orange is a proud, diverse community, and I am a commissioner on the West Orange Human Relations Committee. So what can you do, because our town government does not represent the diversity in this community, how can you address this? Because I understand that there are 20% seniors, but it's also 27% diverse minorities.
You know, that's a great question and a tricky question. Again, I told you earlier, we try to engage people to get involved in the community. Sometimes it's hard. So even go back to the issue of term limits. Change for change's sake doesn't necessarily mean a good thing. We need to do everything we can to encourage good people of every race, of every corner of town, to get involved. And quite honestly, and I don't know that I know the answer to that, that's been a struggle not only in this community, but nationwide. Volunteerism is down. You look at some of our organizations in town, Rotary, Unico, some of the more staples of community service around the nation, their enrollments are way down. So I'm not sure what the best option is as a community, other than, especially through organizations like the Human Relations Commission, to encourage people to get involved. It's a challenge, and I think it's going to be a really important challenge, and maybe among the priorities over the next 8 to 10 years in this community, to encourage people from every corner of town to get more active in town.
Thank you, Mayor.
Asmer, you don't love your councilman? I'm just kidding. It is an issue you see on the council and in the mayor's office, and you see it on the Board of Ed to a certain degree. There isn't a equal representation that fits the whatever sort of racial or ethnic or any sort of differentiation that you want to look at. I have to tell you, I've asked and tried to persuade more than 30 people to run for council. People that all I wanted was smart, independent, and had a good chance to win. And people turn it down. Most of them have turned it down. And I want to encourage everybody here to get involved. It doesn't matter where you come from, what your ethnicity is, what your skin color is. Just come and try to contribute. And if you like it, keep coming back and keep looking for other things to do. But there's not a whole lot we can do outside of setting up quotas to try to do that. I just would encourage everybody to try to do that. And when I make my appointments, I reach out everywhere and try to get the best person. And sometimes they're not old, fat, white guys like me. They're from different parts of the world, and that's one of the great things about West Orange.
Okay. Here's another little fluffy, light question for you guys. If you received $1 million grant from the state of New Jersey, what would you do with it? Joe?
Whenever you get a grant from the state of New Jersey, you have to read it carefully because they always come with conditions. It really just depends on what that grant would actually specify. Usually it's for particular transportation projects or green space or whatever. So since I don't know that, I would just say, what would we do with $1 million?
Right.
Well, one of the things I want to do by reducing our budget is to return some of that to the property owners, the property taxpayers. In this case, guess what? It's still our tax money that we're giving back, right? It's just coming from the state instead of coming out of 66 Main Street. One of the things I try to talk about a lot is that we need to focus on infrastructure. That means roads, public safety. We have, at our firehouses, we have a study that says that it needs more than $2 million of just repairs. Not improvements, not expansions, more than $2 million in repairs. But we're not devoting more than $600,000 to that work now. That's a perfect example. When I say we need to focus on public safety, we should be fixing our firehouses pronto. And we should not be spending them on, as much as we like skate parks, even more than $200,000 for a skate park, even though we want to spend $110,000 on something called ice bumper car facility, we really should focus our spending on public safety, like the firehouses, like roads, like traffic safety. And I also think that we should devote a little bit of money to fixing up our recreational fields. And if there's any money left over, we should give it back to the library.
Thank you. So $1 million would be really nice. Just a couple points. So it's not fair to say we're not fixing up our firehouses. Of course, we're fixing up our firehouses. We're simply doing it in stages. So we've approved money. We'll approve money again next year. So it's nice to disagree, but we should disagree on facts. We are allocating the money for the fire department. We're just doing it carefully. I think if we had $1 million, what I hear over and over again in all my years in government, without question, from neighborhood to neighborhood, is speeding and traffic in the neighborhoods. As this area of the state has gotten so densely populated, cars are much faster than they used to be. Cars can go 30 miles an hour without even putting your foot on the gas. So I would think if we had $1 million, although it wouldn't go far with 100 miles of roads, there's a lot of areas in town that could use some attention. We have on order, they were part of the capital budget this year, several of the blinking solar-powered stop signs as well as the speed signs. So certainly more money to be allocated for equipment like that, in addition to some traffic improvements and signage as well as painting of roads. I think if we had $1 million that came without conditions from the state, we probably could use that in a number of neighborhoods that need attention and that have specific issues related to speed and traffic volume. Any questions?
Hi, my name is Ann Spring. I've been in the town 44 years. And I have to say, in all of Essex County, we are probably the most beautiful town. We have the facilities here more beautiful all the time. But what amazes me is when I go down to Main Street and see that we have a National Historic Treasure in the Edison complex, and that tens of thousands of people from around the country come to the Edison facilities to see the home, to see the factory and everything that goes on there. And then they have to get into a car and take their family to find a place to eat lunch. Why is it that we can't attract, for example, in the CVS empty space, there's 2 stores empty there. Why can't we attract a restaurant, a family restaurant, to come in there and service that area. To me, it seems that we need some creative ideas and to attract some publicity, whatever it takes. What would you do to attract a nice family restaurant to that area, which I think is so badly needed?
Great question. At some point, government can force businesses. We should encourage, but people ultimately have to make the investment into a spot and decide they want to sign a lease and do all that. So that's ultimately, in the end, out of the town's hands. What we can do, especially with the Downtown Alliance, and despite what I heard here today, which I disagree, I think the Downtown Alliance has made tremendous strides in the downtown area over the last 5 or 6 years, maybe even over a greater period of time. As far as the CVS property with the 3 vacancies, they've been vacant on purpose because there's some environmental issues that have to be cleaned up before they can be rented. The spaces in the redevelopment project, the 18,000 square feet, I believe, to your point, there will be some food stores, some restaurants that will be there. They're simply waiting, again, before a business owner wants to invest the money and sign a lease. They want more people to be living in the new development project. So there's 50 apartments filled. That's really just a fraction of the over 300 in total. So I would suspect that those retail spaces will start to be filled probably in 19 as more and more people continue to live and move into the downtown area. As far as the downtown overall, I do know, and we hear that all the time, that people don't stay after visiting the historic site. I happen to think there's a number of wonderful places to eat in the downtown. Now, maybe it's not always communicated well, though I think, again, a credit to our Downtown Alliance, much more so than they did a decade ago. They work very closely with the historic site in terms of cross-marketing. So I do think the communication as to what's available in the area for visitors to the historic site has gotten much better. Always room for improvement. But I think when you look at the vacancies you reference, I think over the next year or so, you'll start to see them built out and occupied. Don't know for sure what they will be, but hopefully there'll be some food restaurants, not only for the redevelopment or for the people visiting the historic site, but ultimately for all of us.
I actually agree with the mayor on most of what he just said. And I want to note that. Retail commercial development is very much a chicken or the egg, all right? The people who want to put in the retail want the foot traffic, they want the car traffic, they want to be able to believe that they can sustain their business. It's the businesses that attract additional traffic to encourage them. So you oftentimes need a third party to step in and provide a bridge to that. And that's, again, why I'm talking about a full-time planner with economic development experience. You do evaluations and studies of different parts of town. You identify the characteristics of that area and then match it with the types of businesses that you want to attract, and then you go out and get them. And I think that's what's really lacking here. I share the hope with the mayor that we get those retail spaces at Edison filled, because like I said, we as taxpayers are shackled by the foot to that development. I want it to be as successful as possible because that means we will get more of a benefit from the project. But that's really the issue. I think you need the third party. I agree with the mayor. I know when I got on the Downtown West Orange Alliance briefly for 1 year, I guess it's been 8 years ago, they were talking about better marketing to Edison visitors. And I don't know with detail where that stands now, but clearly we need more retail downtown, and I think the way to do that is to get a full-time planner with economic development experience and let them go to it.
Questions from the audience? Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Yes, hi, Seth Weiss, Twitter. I've been in West Orange for 8 years now. West Orange is a great town. I think we can all agree on that. We've all applauded it. It's beautiful. It's got more to offer. I found a park yesterday that I'd never seen in 8 years because my little daughter plays soccer. I used to live in New York City on the Upper West Side. And there's many young people who are looking to establish their families. They're looking for that bigger space. They want to have land around them. I disagree. Forget planning, forget studies, all these things. These businesses will come if we have the people that are coming. First choice of most people moving from Manhattan is Livingston, South Orange, Maplewood, then maybe West Orange. So my question to both candidates, how are we going to get the people and make West Orange first choice, not second choice?
We have to make our town even more attractive, and not just the physical beauty, but the financials. Everybody here knows that when people look to buy houses, they figure out what their monthly nut's going to be, and they can figure out whether they can afford it or not. West Orange suffers, I believe, from high property taxes and, based on the record, the future of property taxes, of increases in property taxes. We need to convince people by showing them that we can control our spending and our taxes before we can expect people to come. You're absolutely right. I'm one of those guys that looked at Livingston, that looked in South Orange, that looked in Montclair, and we came here. And I'm very glad we did. But I think that's the key element that we're missing here, is that it's a wonderful town, great people, really beautiful, lots of parks, close to all. So why are we lagging? Let's look at the taxes. Everybody here own property, pay the taxes. You know what it's like. And you know why people go to other areas where not only the tax increases and the taxes are a little bit lower, but the expectations for lower growth are also there. And guess what? That benefits our property's value. And that's why you see a lot of these other towns with higher property values that people can't afford, so they come to West Orange. And then they find out about the taxes. So we really need to work on the taxes, managing the spending, and keeping the taxes as low as possible. I think that would be a key element of attracting people here.
Thank you. Seth, I happen to agree that West Orange is a wonderful community. But at the same time, I'm realistic. I spent my whole life here. Have we ever priced the same as Livingston and Montclair? No. I'm not smart enough to really say why that is, but it's not taxes. If someone's going to say that our taxes are worse than Montclair or Maplewood, it's simply a falsehood. Why it is, if you were to ask me and I had to give an answer, I would say it has to do with the train line. We're not on the train line. Montclair, South Orange, Maplewood, they are. I do think the jitney has helped to bridge that gap. But you're not wrong. I still hear from people almost every day who came from New York. They first focused on Maplewood and Montclair and ended up coming here. That's to our benefit that they did. But I understand that. But I would say it's because of the train line. Our jitneys have helped to address that. But to say it's simply taxes is wrong. And again, it goes back to governing with a balance. So are we going to be attractive to families from New York if we don't pave our roads, if we don't have great recreational facilities, if we don't have great amenities in our parks? Of course we're not. And I recognize that taxes are a burden. Municipal taxes are 25% of the tax bill. Over the last 10 years, West Orange has had the lowest municipal tax increase of any town in Essex County. Yes, they've gone up to the fullest extent of the law, 2% the last couple of years. The councilman didn't recognize that 4 years out of 5 prior to that, we had 0 tax increase. So to say that the only reason people are coming here second is because of taxes, when you look at Montclair and Maplewood taxes, respectfully, I completely disagree. We can do much better, and I think we're making headway with the efforts of the PR Commission and some other marketing, but today it's not taxes.
Hi, my name is Robin Iserlis. Do you believe our town should voluntarily cooperate with federal immigration enforcement authorities when not required to by law? If so, why? If not, would you be willing to officially claim that by signing a fair and welcoming executive order? And if not, why not?
So the administration has worked a lot on a fair and welcoming policy. It's not philosophically that there's a disconnect. It's in some of the language. So there are several towns that around us that have passed fair and welcoming policies that the administration and the police would gladly support and ask council for consideration. The problem is in some of the language of the most recent proposal says that unilaterally across the board never can the township deal with ICE. And I don't think, nor does the police chief think that that's realistic, because a circumstance could arise in which for the safety of all the community that you might need to. It's not voluntarily. Right now we don't voluntarily deal with them other than when required to by law. But I do hope that some version of a fair and welcoming policy can be created, but it cannot say that we can never, under any circumstances, deal with ICE, because I don't think, from a public safety perspective, that's realistic to bind the police department for the township indefinitely into the future.
I'm going to have to talk really fast because there's a lot to handle in that answer. We are a nation of immigrants. We are a township of immigrants, and that's part of what makes it such a wonderful place to live. But the country's immigration situation is in turmoil. Our elected officials in Washington need to immediately address the issues, even if it means they have to compromise. We can't solve our country's immigration challenges in West Orange, so I think it's prudent to use as little of the town's resources on this issue as possible and focus on things we can fix. Therefore, I plan to continue to follow the New Jersey Attorney General Office's law enforcement guidelines in a fair and welcoming approach similar to those adopted by many New Jersey municipalities. I will continue to support strong anti-discrimination policies. I will continue to support the township's program for municipal ID cards. I will continue procedures to allow victims of crime and any witnesses to participate in police investigations without fear of deportation. I'm pledging no local officers will be deputized as ICE agents. No township resources will be used to carry out federal immigration operations. But township police may need to be deployed in emergency situations in a support capacity to help ensure the safety of a situation, because safety, after all, is one of the main purposes of our government. We don't even have an issue about entering into contracts to detain immigrants. But I will not authorize the release from police custody any person credibly accused or convicted of a crime of a nature that would potentially cause harm to our residents. And I know that doesn't fit with the template of what the ACLU wants, but that's my feeling. That's my position.
Okay, last question. Two questions, then we wrap up. Promise.
Adam Kramer. I don't need the microphone. The West Orange School Board accounts for 61.3% of the tax levy. Township accounts for 24.9%, and the County of Essex for 13.8%. Thus, should we change from an elected school board to a mayoral appointed school board? If the answer is no, how will the mayor have the ability to control taxation in a meaningful way? And if the answer is yes, how will you use your appointment to balance quality education with fiscal reality?
I think this is a really short answer. I like the ability of you voters deciding who is on your Board of Ed. I may not agree with you on it, but I really like the idea that you guys get to choose as opposed to, on a unified basis, the mayor appointing people to the Board of Ed. I just think it's more democratic, and I may not like some of the decisions that voters make sometime, but that's the nature of our democracy. But I feel comfortable, more comfortable with having residents select who they want to represent them on the Board of Ed. And hold them accountable for doing the right thing.
Yeah, Adam, I agree with the councilman. I don't believe the Board of Ed should be made up of mayoral appointments. It's an elected body. It should remain an elected body. They should be subjected to the same thing we are. Responsibility to serve the public, and if they're not serving in an effective capacity than they're unelected. So I don't believe the township should have anything to do with the appointments or elections of board members other than as citizens of the community. The mayor has enough responsibility, whoever the mayor happens to be, in serving the community on a daily basis. It shouldn't have an input who serves in the school.
Martin Moskowitz is my sister, so I get to ask the last question. In keeping with many of the budgetary issues, Senator Sweeney has put forward a program to consolidate services with towns, either on a county level or multiple townships within the same county, citing that our property taxes in the state are outrageous, mostly because we have so many fiefdoms scattered around the state. What are your views on the consolidation of fire, school, police on a multiple city or a county level?
Great. So that's only one part of the problem. So if there's 565 towns in New Jersey, if they were all the size of West Orange, there'd only be 100. So I think for much smaller towns in the Sussex County area, some in South Jersey, regionalizing, combining towns, that would ultimately be their call. I do think there's an economic savings. There's not necessarily an economic savings to towns like West Orange that are already fairly sizable with full-size departments. We studied merging our fire department with Orange for a number of years, several years ago, and found in the end it was a savings to Orange, not to West Orange. So I don't know that shared services for West Orange is a long-term financial savings, other than maybe a couple senior officers type thing. Not that that's not realistic, but in my opinion, with deference to Senator Sweeney, the real problem with New Jersey and the tax problem is the state pension and the employee benefits. Not knocking anyone who's public employees, but just from a mathematics perspective, it's significant. So we can talk about whether or not there's been wasteful spendings, but the reality is since 2010, our pension and benefit costs have risen 60%. Now, again, not knocking them or not passing judgment, but just from a mathematics perspective, that's a real burden not only to West Orange, but to towns statewide. So if you really ask my opinion after being in government for a number of years, the struggle with taxes is pension and benefit costs and levels of government. I'm not knocking county government, not knocking municipal government, but we have a lot of layers of government and we have a lot of costs that are fixed associated with government. So we do shared services with some neighboring towns, animal control services, a few things. It does produce some revenue. That's not going to solve our tax problem in New Jersey. The real issue is contractual obligations we have to matter to members of the personnel department.
One of the great things about living in West Orange is I get to meet people from all over the country. Do you guys realize, those of you who have always lived here, realize that most of the country doesn't have the problem that we have with 565 municipalities and Lord knows how many school districts. I grew up in Georgia and Tennessee and Virginia. They all had one school district for the entire county. They had one county government and very few municipalities. And who knows where those tax rates are? They're a lot less than ours. So I'm totally on board with, theoretically, with what Senator Sweeney is talking about, but there is just huge obstacles to doing this. I would love to do that consolidation because it would sincerely reduce our costs. And I agree with the mayor that that our major costs have to do with pension and health care benefits. They're mandates from the state, and not a whole lot we can do with that except at the state level. But I would be open. In fact, one of my planks on my common sense budget is to say that we need to redouble our efforts to look at any sort of shared services that we can do with other municipalities to reduce these costs. And when I say shared services, I don't mean these sort of deals that we're doing with the Board of Education to allow the municipality to borrow for projects for the Board of Education on school property with these sort of fig leaf shared services agreements. I'm talking about real shared services with other municipalities that would help us lower the costs. I think there's opportunities there, and we need to focus on, especially on, for example, transportation, senior transportation. There are seniors in every municipality in Essex County that need to get to other towns, and we need to figure out a way to work better with them so that we can share those costs and become more efficient. It's just one example.
I want to thank, you hear me? Okay. I want to thank everybody for sitting through almost 2 hours and enjoying ourselves today. And meeting the mayor.
Special thanks to Jen Tunicliffe and Peter Tunicliffe for timekeeping and microphone.
Right.
Thank you, Rabbi Tobin.
Before we leave, we'd like both of our mayoral candidates to say 2 minutes of closing up here, and go ahead. Mayor? What? Yeah, 2 minutes.
Thank you. I'd just like to quickly wrap up and start by thanking Jill and Roz for putting this together. I'd like to thank Rabbi Tobin and the whole congregation for hosting us here today. Thank you for that. I'd like to thank Councilman Krakoviak for participating and for his service. He's a pain in the neck. but he's serving the community. It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure to work with most of the time. It's been a pleasure. So look, no more long speeches at this point. I try to do the best I can every day to serve the community in what can be a challenging community in where we find ourselves in challenging times. We have 305 employees who go out every day to serve the nearly 50,000 people of this town. Of course, we don't get everything right. Of course, we could disagree on projects that we fund or programs that we implement. But in each case, I do the best I can every day to make decisions that I think are in the best interest of most of the community. Not one decision have we ever made that all 50,000 people agreed with, or that one program or project is going to serve all 50,000 equally. Each day, and if elected again, I will continue to do the best I can to serve this wonderful community and do the best I can in representing myself and my family and how I do that.
So I'm going to try to speak fast for the 2 minutes. I just want to bring up some research that I've seen. It was an article that was based upon state property tax records looking at the declines from 2007 to 2017 in all of the counties, including Essex. In West Orange, property values had decreased a greater percentage than any other town in West Essex over the last 10 years. Declined 25.19%. That was greater than the next closest, which was Verona, which declined 17%. Livingston, 11%, South Orange, almost 8%, and Montclair, almost 5%. Now, two of the West Essex County towns that came closest to our property value decline, Caldwell at 21.9% and Fairfield at 25%, both lowered their municipal taxes in 2017. There's something to think about. I've given you a detailed plan for a better West Orange. We need to control municipal spending through the common sense budget. We need to reduce property taxes to increase property values. We need to require competitive bidding on all contracts over $10,000. I want to improve accountability and transparency in your government. I want to restore smart development. I want to expand senior services, including the advisory board and transportation. I want to promote our historic preservation. I want to protect open space. I support term limits for town council and mayor. I want to upgrade the library and the parks and recreation. It's time for a change.
The name of this building is B'nai Shalom. As many of you know, the Hebrew word Shalom means peace, it means health, it means wholeness, it means well-being. These are all of our hopes for our community. In an age of divisiveness, diatribe, and lack of honesty on every level in politics, I am grateful for and thankful for these two gentlemen for being gentlemen in civic discourse for the well-being of our town. It is not to be taken lightly, and it is to be lauded at every step. I want to remind you that Tuesday is the deadline to register to vote in New Jersey. Please make sure that you and everyone you know is at the polls on time. Be well.